When I was a kid, my teacher came up to me and told me, Mike, you're never going to amount to anything. You don't apply yourself nearly as much in high school as the others. I don't care if you have ADHD. I don't think you're going to make anything out of yourself and you're going to fail in life. Literally told me that when I was in 10th grade. As I got older, friend after friend after friend decided to drop me off, saying that, hey, we don't want to be associated with you because we think you're going nowhere in life. So could you imagine the look on their faces after I built one YouTube channel that hit 100,000 subscribers and then eventually 450,000 subscribers in the Flight Mic? And then I decided to go full time and open my second YouTube channel in Mikerophone and have that channel hit 100,000 subscribers within 5 months with your guys' help. Guys, we have officially released our merchandise for this YouTube channel. It's a limited time only. We're gonna have it up for about one more week. It was originally supposed to be for a week. It's gonna be for an additional week. And I want you to know what this merchandise represents to me and what you're getting when you purchase it. Because when you buy it, you're pretty much saying that I am a day one supporter of Mike Mafia. And I want you to understand why this merchandise means so much to me. This is for all the people who consistently are told that they're never going to amount to anything. This is for the ones that were bullied in high school. Go to microphone.org if you want to purchase some of my merchandise, and I'll go a little bit more into my personal story in a Twitch stream because I don't want to drag on this intro for too long. We're also giving away a PlayStation 5 to anyone that's subscribed and turn on my notifications on this YouTube channel. We have additional PS5 giveaways going on Twitter and Instagram as well. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Guys, lately we've been coming out with a lot of trade rumors on the NFL on this channel. And personally, I can't wait till they go away because a lot of you guys hate the trade rumors. And as an NFL news channel that also doubles in NFL long form content, I feel like it's kind of my responsibility to report some of the news. But I felt like I'd also make a video to catch you guys up on every player that's about to be traded prior to the NFL trade deadline. Now, look, just because a player is on this list doesn't necessarily mean they're guaranteed to be traded, but you could make a plausible argument for them to be traded. And of course, if there's been any update to these players, I'm going to try to include them because I made this list a week ago and things may have changed for each and every player since. So from the very beginning, I think the player that makes the most sense on this list is Ryan Fitzpatrick. And the reason for that is the Miami Dolphins are transitioning to Tua Tagovailoa. And we all knew this was going to be an inevitability, but Ryan Fitzpatrick has performed so well on the Miami Dolphins as a 37-year-old that I feel like the Dolphins could get some return from a desperate team that needs a good quarterback or even a good QB mentor if they're able to trade Fitzmagic. Now, teams that pop into my mind are the New York Jets, who have been having some QB trouble, not only because of Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold's also been getting injured and Joe Flacco is just absolutely horrific. And the Dallas Cowboys, who literally had to go down to their third string quarterback after Andy Dalton got injured in their previous game. Now, the likelihood that he gets traded really depends upon the offer that they are given, and I don't think the Miami Dolphins really need a lot to sell from Ryan Fitzpatrick. But the unfortunate part about moving on from Fitzmagic is the fact that, well, people love this guy. The entire locker room loves Fitzmagic. Every single teammate of Ryan Fitzpatrick only had positive things to say about him. So that's the only thing that I think could hold them back from potentially moving on from him. Speaking of quarterbacks, up next on this list, we have Sam Darnold and Quinn Williams. And Sam Darnold finds himself in a very backward situation that's eerily reminiscent of what happened to Josh Rosen in his lone year with the Arizona Cardinals. You see, Sam Darnold's team is so bad that they are in a potential position to have a #1 overall pick, and they're looking at a quarterback because this year's quarterback prospect, Trevor Lawrence, is viewed to be as one of the most transcendent quarterbacks to ever hit the NFL draft in quite some time. Now, at the time of this video, there's only been 7 games played for the New York Jets. So there is some time for a turnaround, so Sam Darnold could come back and play some games. He could get some wins. Hopefully he could move the Jets out of a position for drafting a quarterback, and they'll move them more into a position to draft this year's top offensive tackle prospect, Penei Sewell. Now, at the same time, the Jets have a ton ton of draft capital, so maybe they're not going to move on from Sam Darnold so quickly, but there has been some trade rumors that have been popping out as a result of this. So about a week ago, it was very likely that the Jets were open to trading Sam Darnold, but now it's appearing to be less and less likely. Now, we heard another rumor that Darnold's defensive teammate and former number 3 overall pick, defensive tackle Quinn Williams, was also on the trade block, and the Jets were taking calls for him as well. And general manager Joe Douglas said that he would consider anything, but for a player as highly regarded as Williams, it's more of a question of how many second rounders you would receive in order to get him. So pretty much the Jets are trying to have a fire sale for as many first round and second round draft picks as they could possibly attain. I feel like they probably wouldn't trade Darnold because at this point you'd probably get a second rounder for an unproven quarterback that has had a very rocky career so far that has a ton of potential. But for Quinn Williams, you could possibly get a couple of second round picks in return for him, or maybe a few third round picks or a second and a third. Either way, those are the two most likely players to be traded on the Jets. I don't think it's super likely that either of them get traded, but I felt like I had to include them on this list anyways, otherwise I get a lot of disappointed subscribers. Another player that we might see traded is Adrian Peterson, and it's not because Adrian Peterson is terrible. He's been defying father time for quite some time right now. He's been very productive when he's been on the field. He's not anywhere near the player that he was in his mid to late 20s, but he could still contribute to a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl. And of course, the Detroit Lions have DeAndre Swift, they have Kerryon Johnson, and if they could get a return for Adrian Peterson, then you could definitely expect them to move on from Adrian Peterson, because at the end of the day, having a running back in your mid-30s doesn't really help anyone, especially if you're not trying to win a Super Bowl. And all Adrian Peterson's trying to do at this point of his career is climb the all-time rushing record list. Now, another player that I said is rumored to be traded, and this rumor was a little bit more dominant a week ago than it is now, is Julio Jones. And at first I thought it made a lot of sense. Julio Jones is making a lot of money. The Atlanta Falcons are near contention. They have Calvin Ridley on the roster, and they have other very good wide receivers on the roster. So it did make a lot of sense for the Falcons to potentially trade Julio Jones, but a recent update suggests that that is just a rumor, and even though they fired Dan Quinn and they're currently 1-6 in the NFL, that isn't very likely to happen. Now, this rumor came out when they were 1-5, but I feel like it's only smart to try to sell everyone on your team if you're not even close to contention at this point, and at least gear towards a rebuild if you're going to have a high draft pick. That's why I think the fact that they're dispelling this rumor is a potential smokescreen. I feel like if there's an offer that the Falcons can't refuse for Julio Jones, then they'll trade Julio Jones, because he is beginning to dip into his 30s. We should see his production take more and more of a step back as his career continues on further. But this is probably my most controversial take. Do you think the Falcons will trade Julio Jones, or do you think they'll try to keep Julio Jones? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say in the comments on this one. Another player that I think is probably very likely to be traded, and I don't believe the Browns GM when he says that they're not going to trade him, is David Njoku. And David Njoku was a first-round pick of the Cleveland Browns, and it seems like, I feel like everyone watching this video at one point or another took David Njoku as their tight end in fantasy football, thinking that this is the year that David Njoku is going to break out. But this past offseason, the Cleveland Browns decided to sign Austin Hooper. They don't really run as many two tight end sets as I'd hope they would, so I don't think it makes a lot of sense to keep Njoku in there. Maybe trade him and bring in someone that's a little bit more adept at run blocking, because of course that's what Kevin Stefanski likes to do with the Cleveland Browns offense. But I don't believe the general manager of the Browns when they said that they're not trading Njoku. I feel like he's a prime player that is on the trade block currently. A team that was interested in him in the offseason, I don't really think that they're as interested in him now, was the Dallas Cowboys, but we have to just wait and see who will try to nab up David Njoku. Maybe the New England Patriots. Now, the final 3 members of this list are extremely likely to get traded, starting with Dwayne Haskins, who for some reason has had his career completely fall apart with the Washington football team. You see, his last game with the Washington football team wasn't that bad. It was against the Baltimore Ravens. He didn't have any turnovers, he didn't have any touchdowns, but he also threw for over 300 yards, and then he kind of bragged to his team about how well he played. despite his team losing to the Baltimore Ravens. And yes, I understand it's the Baltimore Ravens, but ever since then, there's been a lot of weird stuff coming out about Dwayne Haskins. For one, he appears to be an absolutely horrible teammate. He reportedly broke the team's COVID-19 protocols by making a reservation for a family friend at the team hotel prior to Washington's Week 6 game against the New York Giants. And the locker room doesn't really like him so much for this. Dwayne Haskins was benched recently, and Ron Rivera had this to say about his benching, whether he regretted it or not. He said no, because Dwayne got all the reps for 11 weeks with the first unit. It gave me 11 weeks to evaluate him and to look at him. And as I said, I made my decision based on what I saw. And that was a young man that is still raw and that still has a lot of work to do. Now, the final two players in this list, I guess we could pair together, mainly because it's impossible to find highlight footage of one of these players, believe it or not. And that's John Ross and AJ Green. You see, you would be surprised at how much the Cincinnati Bengals invested in their wideouts in the recent years. If you go back within the past couple years, they spent a top 5 pick on John Ross after he broke the 40-yard dash record. They also spent draft picks on Tyler Boyd, and most recently they drafted T. Higgins. But in addition to that, they also brought AJ Green back on a 1-year franchise tag deal, which makes him the highest paid player on their roster. And you can just tell from AJ Green's body language on the field that he just doesn't want to be there anymore. At this stage of his career, it kind of makes sense. He's given his all to the Cincinnati Bengals franchise, and they haven't even come close to sniffing a Super Bowl. So I could understand why AJ Green would want to go and sign with a contender at this stage of his career, and why John Ross probably thinks, hey, look, everybody's looking at me like I'm a draft bust over here. Your general manager is still drafting brand new wide receivers. Clearly, I'm not valued in this scheme, and clearly, I can't contribute much to this team. And for that reason, I would really appreciate if you could trade me. Now, AJ Green recently wanted to be traded. Apparently, he's a little bit more comfortable in his role now, but that's just a report. I personally don't believe it or buy it. There's a lot of teams that could be using his services, and I really highly doubt the Bengals will franchise tag him once again this offseason, nor will they sign him to a long-term extension. So this is probably going to be AJ Green's final season in a Bengals uniform. You might as well dangle him around for some trade bait and see if anyone will bite on him and potentially take him. So I feel like the most likely player on this entire list to be traded is AJ Green, and a good team could pick him up for the cheap. He's clearly not the player he used to be, and he's clearly still trying to shake off some of the cobwebs. They're not featuring him nearly as much in the offense, and it's not like the Cincinnati Bengals are contending anyways. Yes, I think Joe Burrow's the real deal, but regardless, even if Joe Burrow's the real deal, they've still been losing games, and they've still only won 1 game so far. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this list. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.